ZANU-PF has responded to the AU-SADC Observer mission's comments on the Zimbabwean election. The AU-SADC Observer mission has commended Zimbabwe for a calm and peaceful election. Head of the mission, Dr. Neva Mumba, commented on the preliminary report on the country's two-day poll. Mumba also spoke about challenges faced by voters in various constituencies. Well, let's unpack Zimbabwe's elections with Peter Mutasa, Chairperson of the Crisis In Zimbabwe Coalition. Peter, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Trust you had a good trip to the US. Just unpack for us your thoughts on what's transpired in the last couple of days since voting started and ended in Zimbabwe.
Right, so I think the reflections are largely reflecting what we have been talking about since 2017 and also after the 2018 election. Civic society has been warning everyone that a lot of intimidation is happening around the country, and also government is using the law and the state institutions in order to stifle democracy and to shrink the democratic space as a means to manipulate the voting and electoral processes. So currently people are apprehensive, speaking to different sectors. People are not sure about their security, especially after the announcement of the presidential elections. There is a sense of insecurity and apprehension, and everyone is keeping their guard and praying that there won't be violence and instability after the whole process.
Well, there are many things that have transpired that raise a number of questions. Now, one of those is the arrest of members of the Zimbabwe Election Support Network and one other agency a few days ago, and they were accused of collating or tabling the results, doing the job of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, and hence were arrested. But we also saw yesterday a press conference that involved ZANU-PF officials in which they stated that they have anything between 60 and 65% of the presidential vote and parliamentary votes. Is this not the same thing?
Right, so this is the duplicity that we have always been complaining about. In Zimbabwe, sadly, the law applies different to members of ZANU-PF and officials of ZANU-PF, as it also applies to the general citizenry and the members of civil society, trade unions, and opposition. An act that is done by ZANU-PF and excused by the law enforcement agents can land someone in prison, as we have seen with political prisoners, Job Sikala and Jacob Ngarifumo, who have been in prison for a long time for things that are done by ZANU-PF, and even worse, ZANU-PF supporters and officials even do worse, but they are excused. So the ZANU-PF officials and supporters enjoy legal immunity that is unlawful, unconstitutional. What Chinamasa said and did is exactly what the Police Commissioner General and the Zimbabwe Republic Police warned, that anyone who does so, anyone who gives an indication of election results will be prosecuted. What have been done by ERC and ZESIN colleagues is permissible at law. The commissioner, the head of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commissioner, Justice Chigumba, actually came out on camera encouraging civil society to do their own parallel tabulation, so that we then exchange and share notes to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission figures. So this is something that is permissible, but people have been arrested. When they were arrested, they were kept incommunicado, without access to their lawyers, without access to doctors for those who need medicine and medical attention. So this is all unconstitutional. But it must be viewed in the whole realm of what has been happening since 2018, where Zimbabwe has been turned into a pariah state, where the constitution has been suspended effectively, and all our freedoms and rights have been taken away. ZANU-PF is doing this because it is aware that it can no longer win a popular vote, because it has lost legitimacy in many fronts, in the economy, in the management of the economy, in provision of public services, and also in the state civil society relations, where dictatorship has deepened and people are now resisting ZANU-PF.
So I'm in possession of this 20-page report, preliminary statement by His Excellency Dr. Nevas Mumba, who's also the former Vice President of the Republic of Zambia. And he's articulated a number of issues, discrepancies, if you will, stuff governed by the Constitution that wasn't carried out. I know you've had a chance to go through that report. Some of the issues around delimitation, freedom of assembly and expression. What are some of the key highlights that you've picked up on these discrepancies?
I think the major one is the lack of delivery by ZEC, the failure to provide simple things like electoral ballot papers, the failure to open many polling stations by the time, and the embarrassing nature of how some polling stations, especially in the Triple C or opposition strongholds in the cities, in the urban areas. You cannot explain, ZEC cannot explain this away or wish it away. They can't explain how far away rural constituencies got all their papers ready, but those constituencies that are closer to where the printing machine is failed to get all their election materials. It can point out to one thing, that this was manipulation, and it was aimed at ensuring that they suppress the urban voters who were going to vote for Chamisa and the Triple C, and they were aiding the rural voters where there is massive intimidation by Forever Associates Zimbabwe, a quasi-security sector institution that ZANU-PF has been working with to manipulate the electoral processes. So this is quite an embarrassing feat. The second one is also the failure by ZEC to provide the voters' roll. This is so because the previous SADC electoral observation mission of 2018 highlighted this again in its recommendation. So 5 years down the line, ZEC has even done worse. It has refused to completely give opposition, civil society, and the citizens a searchable and analyzable voters' roll. By 2 days to the elections, none of the contestants in the opposition party had that voters' roll. But we all know that those in ZANU-PF and its candidates already were using that voters' roll to get to electorate. We're getting unsolicited SMSs and WhatsApp messages, which indicate that ZANU-PF had the voters' roll. But we also have an embarrassing highlight, which is one of the judiciary. It is quite embarrassing that our judiciary is becoming the greatest loser in the manipulation of the electoral processes, where SADC observers have pointed out that many stakeholders were complaining that the judiciary seems to be biased, and that justice is not seen to be done. Because on the eve of the election, the judiciary is getting almost $500,000 United States dollars packages that we know they will not be able to repay. And these are the people that are supposed to be arbitrators when there are electoral disputes. So we applaud in the civic society the braveness and courageous SADC election observer mission. And the issues that are the highlights are not new. These are issues that we've been complaining about. ZANU-PF is sending out tantrums around this issue, but they ought to be embarrassed and they ought to embrace their neighbors' concerns and address these issues so that they come out of an election with legitimacy.
Well, Peter, let's go back to ZANU-PF, or the Zimbabwean government's acknowledgement of SADC and other African bodies. Now, we know that in 2018, there were 6 individuals that were shot in cold blood by soldiers from the Zimbabwe National Army. Now, nobody's been brought to book. President Kgalema Motlanthe delivered a report, and none of those recommendations have been taken into account. And this is about the first time that the SADC has given a report that does not support or that calls out the Zimbabwean government, or certainly ZANU-PF. Do we expect SADC to stamp its authority on these elections? Any more than the release of this report?
ZANU-PF has always been a bully in the region. You remember the decisions of SADC were overturned, the decision of SADC tribunal were overturned, and even the SADC tribunal was even closed down because ZANU-PF has always been using this big brother mentality. I've been listening to the ZANU-PF spokesperson, Mr. Mutsvangwa. I've also listened to the Minister of Justice who were speaking just now on press conferences. They seek to invoke the liberation struggle stories so that they emotionalize this issue, and they want to make themselves appear as the big brothers in the SADC region. What they are obviously hiding from the citizens is the fact that they were housed in Zambia. ZANU-PF cannot teach democracy to Zambia because it is Zambia that was the midwife of our liberation struggle and independence. So we suspect that they will continue to bully other leaders in the region as they always did during Mugabe's era. But I don't think President Mnangagwa has got that stature that Mugabe enjoyed, which was revered around the continent and in the region. And I think they have to pick their fights well, and they have to be very circumspect about what they are going to do. If they are going to take all their regional neighbors in contempt, I think that may backfire. So this is a first for SADC, SADC report that is quite candid. We applaud it, and we want everyone to support it, including ZANU-PF and Zimbabwean government. We will benefit from implementing the recommendations as a nation. Zimbabwe is for all of us. It mustn't be for ZANU-PF. And the sooner ZANU-PF and the ZANU-PF government realizes that, we all benefit. If it does not get legitimacy from these elections, we are going to have serious challenges with the economy. The economy is going to implode. We are also going to have serious social challenges, including migration in the region. So SADC has to stand up to the bullies and ensure that they address these issues because they are regional crisis issues.
Well, one of the first things that Dr. Nevers Mumba says is, after consulting widely with stakeholders, the general consensus was that the country was generally calm and peaceful. And I think this is absolutely commendable. But we understand from reports that there is a heavy police and army presence that is making a way across certain parts of the country. Do we expect peace and calm to remain in Zimbabwe?
So peace is normally not the absence of physical violence, as our elders have taught us, but the presence of justice and fairness. So yes, SADC says, and many election observers said there was general peaceful environment. It is only a reflection of the time that they came into the country. The elections are not rigged on the electoral or the voting day. Election rigging in Zimbabwe is a process that stems from one election cycle to another. So since 2018, there's been intimidation mostly in the rural areas, where we are also seeing a number of citizens voting for ZANU-PF. People were being threatened with the 2008 equivalent violence if ZANU-PF loses. We've seen the Forever Associates FAS organization also being at the polling stations and intimidating people, taking people's identification details and threatening that they are seen where they are voting. And that can be said to be peaceful. Intimidation is violence. We've also seen ZANU-PF using food aid in the rural areas, threatening people who do not support it, that the government will not provide you with food aid. We've also seen ZANU-PF preventing civil society organization, community-based organization from accessing certain rural areas and from carrying out voter education and also civic and political education. That is violence. So there's been a plethora of violence that has been going on since 2018, and unfortunately electoral observers may not have seen that. But on the electoral day, yes, there was generally some sense of peace, but people in rural areas in my view, did not vote and in a peaceful environment. They were engulfed in intimidation. And this is not going to go away unless we have genuine electoral reforms and political reforms in this country.
Peter, my final question is certainly around some of those recommendations from the last election in 2018 that have been made, that the CCC was aware of, and the fact that they may, according to some parties, not have done enough to ensure that these recommendations were implemented. Now, how much blame or how much responsibility should the CCC or other opposition parties take for reform that has not occurred in the last 5 years?
Many people should understand that we are basically under a military regime or military dictatorship, where the constitutional provisions like freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and freedom of association have been taken away. So in our analysis and in our appraisal of all the institutions that are supposed to engender democracy, citizen movements, civil society, trade unions, and also the opposition, we also need to take into account that the reality. We need to analyze this issue in an analysis of a competitive authoritarian rule, where they allow certain democratic processes and institutions to remain in place and to appear to be functioning. But in actual fact, they have taken away all your freedoms and your rights. So the opposition, remember, it lost, Chamisa's opposition lost his party, the MDC Alliance or MDC-T, through the ZANU-PF machinations and through the judiciary. And it had to start afresh. We are just witnessing a political resurrection miracle, in my view, where Chamisa and his CCC have behaved like a phoenix and resurrected from the ashes of ZANU-PF annihilation strategies. So yes, they could have done something. We cannot excuse all of them altogether. They could have done something better, but we are under a military rule that has got a civilian face. People outside may think that we have got democracy, we still have a parliament, we still have judiciary, we still have police and national prosecuting authority and constitutional commissions. But in actual fact, there is conflation between the ruling party, the security apparatus, and the state. The institutions that are supposed to engender democracy are not functioning, and that is the environment that CCC must be assessed broadly looking at.
Peter Mutasa, Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition Chairperson, appreciate your time this evening unpacking for us that preliminary statement by His Excellency Dr. Neville Mumba, former Vice President of the Republic of Zambia.